This is Linda Leigh Johnson, and we are going to talk about the conditioned human. We're going to provide a course of study, a set of ideas that puts light on our inner states. Yes, we're going to explore how we are controlled by suggestions that we buy into from every conceivable source. And we're going to identify and look at some of these belief systems that have been built on misperceptions and traumatic experiences. So this course is about staying awake to our identity, staying awake or self-observation, where we can wake up to the conditioning, or that we can wake up to see and experience our authentic self. And in this study of self-exercises are going to be offered to you to develop your intuition through inner watching, inner observation. Oh my goodness, does this bring untold freedom in every area of our life. Jesus said, "Can you stay awake with me for just 1 hour?" So this is about staying awake to our identity, being self-aware of our old conditioning that is not the authentic self. You know, the not eyes are like lighthouses that are warning us of the perils that lie beyond. In Galatians 2:20, Paul said, "I live, yet not I, but Christ liveth in me." So this is about the not I, that which is not you. They are the voices of guilt, the voices of self-pity that speak within us, making us miserable. So these lessons provide a course of study, a set of ideas that will put light on your inner state. And it is important to remember that nothing presented here is to be accepted on face value. Investigate, observe, and if after careful, repeated observations, these ideas do not provide or prove to be valuable and truthful, just discard them. The teachings are based on the work of Gurdjieff, who was a Russian Christian mystic, and he taught this wonderful system of self-knowing or self-observation. Self-knowing or self-observation is where one objectively knows self-being. It's aware of self. He's being aware of conditioning or that which is not you, in order that you can see what is you. Conditioning tends to disappear when it is observed without judgment. Self-remembering leads to continual self-knowing, in which one is now conscious of who or what one really is, what is really going on here, and what one can do. And Gurdjieff said the real battle is not with another person or event. It is with one's own mind activity, the many I's. There's really only one significant issue: to be or not to be. So these teachings are going to shed light on the relationship between the spiritual aspect of your being and your psychology, your physiology, your structure, as well as your biology. Without this understanding, either by the teaching or some other means, the extent of your understanding is merely mechanical. And anything mechanical does not have a will of its own. It simply functions in accord with the operations placed upon it. It has no determination of its own and is completely subject to what happens to it, like an automobile. It also has no determination or will to either move or remain parked. It can only perform as it was designed to perform, and as that action is initiated by a driver. Similarly, it is common for many human beings to be in such a state that anyone can just push a button and cause them to be angry, cause them to work, or to be upset, or to cause them to agree with an idea which could possibly lead them into a state of slavery sooner or later. In other words, a state of dependency on something else. We might say that when we become angry, worried, or excited, or frightened, or resentful, or bashful, jealous, or many, many other emotional states, that we are bent out of shape. We are far from being happy and pleased within ourselves. And we didn't choose that state, did we? They appear to just happen to us. And in that state, we are mechanical. Our first observation then is to realize just to realize we didn't choose the state that we find ourselves in. Besides the idea that one is mechanical, the second key idea is the teaching is that conditioned man is 100% subject to suggestion 100% of the time. For a suggestion to work, it must be based on something that is the prime form within one, his frame of reference. Very early in our existence, possibly at the moment of our birth, we formed a fundamental conclusion that the entire purpose of living is to regain the non-disturbed state by gaining pleasure and escaping pain. And here is a picture of man. You'll see at the bottom we have the body. That's the smallest part of us, isn't it? Then we have the awareness function, and then we have infinite intelligence, or we can call that the infinite life principle. And we're always receiving impressions, aren't we? From the environment, from individuals, from weather, traffic, clothing. We always form a feeling from these impressions. We like it, we don't like it, it's annoying. So infinite intelligence sends impulses to the body to carry out the appropriate action for the feeling that it's received. And the awareness function interprets and reevaluates everything and sends the conclusion to infinite intelligence, or the life principle, and the values and judgments depend upon a person's purpose at that very moment. So just take a look at that and see how that life principle at the top, infinite intelligence, sends impulses back into the body for the message that it received from awareness function, and awareness function received those impressions from the environment. So most people live their lives reporting through these impressions that there's a flaw going on, there's a problem. Maybe it's small, but there seems to always be a flaw in our life. Have you ever noticed that? And few of us have really feel like we're in control of our inner state, because we're seeing with judgment all that is occurring. Do you agree? Wouldn't it be nice if we could just decide to choose how we would like to see things, or how we would like to feel? How would I like to experience rejection, or how would I like to experience losing my job, or just receiving some disapproval or being ignored? Unfortunately, most people have an obstruction to seeing and choosing the state that they want to be in. We're not in charge of our inner state. Would you say some of the time that might be true? So we are going to take a look at what these obstructions to being in charge of our inner states are. You may not be aware, but we are upset by disturbances of various kinds. Some of us were maybe upset when we even awakened in the morning. The very first thing we want when we awaken in the morning is to be non-disturbed. Most of us have been around infants, and they are so intent on being non-disturbed. The process of being born was the source of that basic conclusion. We arrived here with a purpose with which we can judge things. We did not get to choose this purpose. It was already established at birth. And let me tell you that being born was a treacherous experience for most of us. The baby feels like it's suffocating, it's choking, it's being pushed and pounded. And sometimes forceps are used to drag the baby out, and then something is put into the eyes and that to may help that burns, and then someone sticks something down the throat to aspirate the mucus. You are grabbed, you're inspected, and then everyone comes and looks at you and says you look like so and so. When the child was in the uterine world, the world was pretty much non-disturbed. There wasn't hunger, cold or hot. Nobody hollered at you, you just floated around. You didn't even have to breathe. It was like having a spacesuit floating around in outer space where there was nothing to do and everything was taken care of for you. There was no resistance. Can you see why this infant would make the unconscious decision that his prime purpose is to gain the non-disturbed state once again, to gain pleasure and escape pain? And everything that produced pain became evil. And once a decision is made with feeling, it is the rule of decision from that moment on until the decision is recognized and reevaluated. The error that we have all made is sensation and circumstances determine my inner state. This is the source of all problems. So the very first decision that a child made was that the first decision was, if I complain, I will have that non-disturbed state. And it really does work. The child complains and he is fed or he's picked up, and the body, self-knowing, is starting to see or being aware that everything I'm doing all day long is to avoid some disturbance to regain that non-disturbed state. So it works well. The baby cries and complains and he gains that comfort and he's changed, like we said. But that was an infant method to gain comfort and pleasure and to escape pain. Is there not a lot of us grown-ups still operating with that very first decision? It's such a problem. Look at some of the things that we find ourselves complaining about. We find ourselves saying to ourselves, oh, so-and-so is, how could they have done this to me? Or often, I just can't trust them to do a good job. I have to do everything myself. Or if only I were acknowledged around the church. After all, I'm doing so much. People that you complain to, have you ever noticed they complain right back to you? So some visible forms of complaining are physical actions. For example, sulking, pouting, slamming things around, clenched fists, and nasty looks. All those are ways of complaining also. The next decision a child makes is about the age of 6 months old. And a mother can tell when a child has made this new decision. The baby is now sticking up for its rights. And it wants to be picked up. It no longer wants to be ignored. It screams when the mother leaves the room. It now has a new basic urge it wants to fulfill, and that urge is, I must have attention and escape being ignored and rejected. Come, pick me up. And this baby sticks up for its rights, and people usually do pick up the baby because he's making them miserable and uncomfortable with his screaming. And babies have been known to turn blue if you don't pick them up. Do we have any rights at all, or do we just have privileges? We were born broke, naked, helpless, no teeth, no way to get around. We were totally unequipped to make it in this world. And many of us were even unplanned. Maybe even an accident, but most of us found a couple of people to clothe us, to feed us, and educate us. How do we stick up for our rights? We become belligerent. We say things like, you cut it in front of me. I earned it. I deserve it. This is my place. This is where I usually sit. I was here first. Or this is mine. It's very expensive. I don't think you'll look after it. Or they deserve what they got after treating me that way. Or, look, your kid abused mine and I'm upset. So sticking up for our rights is usually just being angry, belligerent, aggressive, and some of us have learned to do it powerfully and sweetly. So can you see now that we've got these two decisions that a child, a little baby has made, but yet here in grown-ups' bodies, we're still doing it. The next decision that a child makes about the age of 2 or 3 years old is, I must please them. So our parents conditioned us to please them often through discipline. So we will have discomfort and disapproval if we don't please them. I must regain that non-disturbed state. Did you ever feel within yourself that you want to complain, but then the pleaser makes you feel guilty, or we decide we must please to gain approval and escape disapproval? But internally, we are in a war. We are complaining, but on the outside we're pleasing and we're smiling. I want to do this, but I don't want to do it. I want to please everybody, but I don't want to do it because it makes me feel like I'm in bondage and insecure. A lot of people walk on eggshells at home with their mates or even on their jobs. They're pleasing on the outside, but on the inside they're complaining and angry on the inside. And then disintegration happens, conflict, struggle, and disease in the body. How many of us please and find that we can never ever please enough? And then we experience disappointment and we internalize it. And then there is a conscience that bothers us when we don't please or when people don't appreciate us. Perhaps we begin to feel sorry for ourselves, and fragmentation then begins. We now have conflict and struggle between the complainer and the pleaser. Can you see that from one side to the other? Have you ever heard, after all I have done, or I've worked my fingers to the bone for you? Well, soon there is another decision that's made. That's number 4. And I must do and believe what I'm told by all my authorities. So we have a lot of authorities. We have parents, we have teachers, we have policemen. Anybody that has us react, we've made them into an authority at the moment. We have health authorities, and on. We get on the internet and we find more authorities. But we want to take a look at some of these authorities that we have in our life. It makes us feel like we have to always do the right thing. It gives us standards and values for ourselves, but sometimes this causes a lot of conflict. With this decision, we live by beliefs, usually someone else's, that we make our own. After all, we've made them our authority, and we come up with a lot of beliefs now. The idea is to check out your authorities. For example, an authority might be, I believe that having money will make me happy. I believe that I will go to hell if I don't go to church. I believe that I should say I believe even if I don't believe. Or I believe if I take all these vitamins that I will work better, I'll have more energy. Or I believe that the doctor, whatever the doctor says, is true. My doctor said I only have 1 year to live, but another doctor says I have 1 month to live. You see the health authorities that we gather to ourselves and how that can make us miserable? So now we're going to go to the 5th decision. And the 5th decision is, it is important that I be different and self-improve. So the 5th decision is, if only I were different. And this one is born about the age of 10 years old or 11 years old. And we try to put on a different front. He begins to build lies within himself. He tries to be or appear different to other people. Later, he will buy many self-help books and make many changes within himself. And he becomes even more conditioned. He may think, if only I looked different, if only I were not fat, or if only I didn't have such a big nose, if only I was more spiritual. It just goes on and on. If only I, um, if only I would be happy if only I were more beautiful. If only I were different, then I know that I would be happy. Number 5 is also the decision that decides, aha, I am more wonderful, I am more beautiful than anybody else. I'm very special. I'm better in business, but it doesn't take very long for that number 5 to also shift and say, I really am no good. So we see that doesn't always help. Our terrible circumstances. So now number 6 is born, and that is right across from number 5. If only she or my circumstances or you were different, and then I would be non-disturbed. And now we begin to blame. We blame the government, we blame the weather, we blame our husband, we blame our wife, we blame our parents, we blame our job, and now one is beginning to want to fight to cure whatever is causing all this pain to our discomfort, to our comfort and pleasure. And he comes into battle with individuals, with larger groups. And would you not say that's probably why we have wars? When one experiences number 6, there's usually a great feeling of blame, fear, and insecurity. And when we're insecure, we are greedy to get some way to make us feel secure. And you'll notice that in the fragmentation that there will be times when we are blaming, and then doesn't take long before we're back into number 5, wishing if only we were different. So we become a fragmented awareness with many not eyes. The fragmented awareness senses stimuli from the environment, and some not eyes interpret everything as good or bad, right or wrong, always in a belief of 2 powers and judging appearances. The judgment is transmitted to infinite intelligence or life principle as to what is happening, and infinite intelligence transmits energy to the body to express that action. So here's a total picture of the conditioned being. So one side, you'll notice, is the A side, and that's got self-pity at the heading, and the other side is the tormentor side, and that causes guilt. Usually we operate from one side or the other side predominantly, but we usually have both sides going on. And if you look in the middle, you'll see the Christ mind. Awareness function is actually the Christ mind, but it's filled with conflict. So it's like a committee meeting is always taking place within inside of us. The not eyes are sending information to infinite intelligence that there's an emergency going on, and infinite intelligence does the appropriate thing and sends extra adrenaline and glycogen and other substances to fight or run. Excuse me. But as we do neither, we stew in all of these juices. And this is what causes a breakdown in the body. The 4 dual basic urges is the next one. And you'll see on the physical level, we're trying to gain comfort and pleasure and escape pain and discomfort. On the mental level, we're trying to gain attention and escape being ignored or rejected. And on the emotional level, we're trying to gain approval and escape disapproval. And on the urge to power, we are looking to feel needed, to feel important, or have an appearance of being important and escape inferiority. Everything about the not eyes or the ego are negative, and they remember they're 100% suggestible 100% of the time. It observes or perceives with true perception, and infinite intelligence receives this perception and causes the body to respond with accurate feeling. This creates an internal environment that is non-polluted with toxicity. And at last, the infinite intelligence is the initiator instead of the servant to the not eyes. There is now a union with infinite intelligence and awareness, and we can say, I and my Father are one. So what we want to do is we want to keep observing ourselves being mechanical. Notice when your buttons are being pushed and that you're acting out mechanically and reactively. Observe yourself being subject to suggestions from many sources. Example from television, authorities, friends, family, medical profession. Learn the not eyes by their number. It's very helpful. And observe yourself pleasing in order to get approval through words and action. Or observe yourself complaining silently or out loud